My name is Arthur, and I need you to listen. I am 84 years old. I waited 50 years to tell my son the truth. Please do not wait. That sentence sounds simple, but it cost a lifetime. A house, holidays, small smiles at dinner, all paid in silence. I told myself I was protecting him. I told myself I knew better. I told myself the world was hard and I was keeping him safe. The truth is uglier. I was afraid. Zul, I lied. He loved to draw. Charcoal on butcher paper. Old magazines cut into shapes, collaged into cities that did not exist. He would stay up late at the kitchen table, lamp pulled low, tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth while he shaded a roof line or the fold of a jacket sleeve. His teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, sent notes home with exclamation points. Your son has a gift. You should encourage him. I grew up with a father who measured love in full pantries and paid bills. Art was a picture on a calendar in a mechanic's shop. Men worked. Men provided. Men did not gamble on talent that could vanish in a bad season. By the time my boy was 17, I had built a small flooring company. We were not rich, but we were steady. I wanted him safe inside the walls I had built. Senior year, he applied to art schools. Rhode Island, Chicago, a school in New York with a building made of glass that we had seen in a magazine. He mailed portfolios wrapped in brown paper and string. He checked the mailbox every afternoon like he was waiting for oxygen. I told myself I would support him if he failed. I never asked if I would support him if he flew. The day the letter came, I was home for lunch. The grass was still wet, and the dog had tracked little crescents of mud across the porch. The envelope was thick and cream-colored, with his name printed in a kind of serious type that made my throat tighten. I knew what it meant before I opened it. I did not have to open it all, but I did. I slid my thumb under the flap and read the first line. We are delighted to offer you admission. I could hear him whistling in the garage, sanding an old stool for his mother. I stood in the kitchen with that letter in my hands, and I saw two futures. In one, he left our town with a suitcase and a heart full of color, and maybe he starved. Maybe he slept on couches and called home on Sundays from payphones. In the other, he stayed. He learned estimates and invoices. He married the girl from the deli. He had a check that cleared every Friday. I chose for him. I did not tell his mother. I folded the letter back into the envelope, pressed the crease with the side of my hand, and slid it under the towels in the hall closet. I told myself I would return it tomorrow, that I just needed to think. I told myself I was buying us time. At dinner, he asked if the mail had come. I looked at the steam rising from the potatoes and said, "Not today." The next day, I took the envelope to the shop and locked it in a drawer. The week after that, another letter arrived and another. I hid them all. When he asked, I said the same three words. "Not today, son." He started to make jokes about it. He would kick off his boots, rub his neck, and say maybe they forgot me. I laughed with him the way a man laughs when he is throwing dirt over the thing he killed. On a Wednesday in March, the phone rang while I was in the yard. He answered. I heard him say, "This is Daniel." Then silence. Then a shaky yes. He looked at me like he had swallowed light. He said it was the admissions office from New York. They asked if the letters had arrived. They asked if he would be attending. His eyes pleaded with me for an answer I did not deserve to give. I told him they must have mixed up the mail. I watched a boy turn into a man in one breath. He nodded. He told them thank you for the opportunity. He said he would be staying home to help the family. He hung up, and I could see him building a wall across his own chest brick by brick, calling it duty. He pushed the sketchbooks into a cardboard box that night. When I took the trash out, I saw the box sitting by the cans. Rain had smeared the charcoal into gray tears. If you were waiting for me to say I told him the truth then, I did not. I told myself I would do it after the busy season, after we signed the big contract, after we got through the holidays. The finish line kept moving, and I kept up the pace, and I used my own son as a reason to lie to my son. He did not complain. He learned how to measure a room by sight. He learned to shake hands and make a man feel seen. That I told myself he seemed content. I told myself that men do not need joy, only purpose. But there were nights when I would wake and walk down the hall and find him at the table, bills spread out, the tip of his pencil tapping a slow apology against the wood. He married. They had a boy of their own. At birthdays, I tried to be generous. I bought gifts. I paid for repairs. I never gave him back the one thing I stole. I kept the letters in a shoe box, a shrine to my lifelong cowardice alone. The years didn't pass. They stacked, one on another like sheets of plywood, smooth on the surface until you pressed down and felt the seams. Daniel learned the trade the way I learned it, by showing up early, staying late, and saying yes to whatever the day demanded. He could eye a room and tell you how many linear feet of baseboard it needed without touching a tape. He could fit planks under a radiator that looked impossible. He became the man people called when jobs went sideways. It was the same skill that made him an artist: the patience, the eye, the willingness to redo a cut until it was right. I watched him build a reputation. Customers asked for him by name. He sent the new kids home with straight lines snapped in blue chalk and a list of things they didn't know yet. His hands grew the kind of calluses that don't leave in winter. I told myself I'd given him something real. I refused to name what I'd taken. He and his wife bought a house 6 blocks from us, a square little place with a magnolia that dropped rusted petals like coins. He hung his level in the garage and labeled jars of screws with a black marker in neat print. There was a small shelf above the workbench. The sketchbooks lived there, spines facing the wall like a row of people embarrassed to be seen. I used to stand in that garage when nobody was around and put my thumb on the stitched edges. I could feel the ghost of pages itching to open themselves. I never did it. I told myself privacy was respect. The truth was I didn't want to find proof I'd amputated something living. When his boy was 5, he started drawing the way his father had, head tilted, mouth set, eyes drilling into the paper like it was a window. Levi, he drew cars at first, then buildings with windows that made sense, tiny people on tiny sidewalks. Mrs. Carter, his kindergarten teacher, sent home a note with an exclamation point. Your grandson has an eye. I put the note on their fridge with a magnet shaped like a tomato. The same afternoon, I heard Daniel tell him, "That's good, bud. Just remember, it's a hobby. A good one, but a hobby." Levi nodded, like kids do, when they don't know what the word means but feel the shape of it closing, that I try to be gentle with the edges of that moment. I bought Levi a set of real charcoal and a proper sketch pad, the kind with tooth in the paper that grips the mark. I told myself it was innocent. Gifts are what grandfathers give. But I watched Daniel's jaw tighten when Levi opened it, the muscle jumping like it used to in my bathroom mirror when I had something to say and chose not to. Later, out by the trash cans, I said, "Let him try, Dan." He shrugged. He is trying. And it was true. He was trying to be the father I'd taught him to be, the kind who pushes towards safe. He was trying to save his son from a future he thought would drop him. He didn't know the feeling of a net, because the man who should have held it had cut it down and folded it into a shoebox. My wife never asked about the letters in the hall closet. I wish I could say she discovered them and forced the truth into daylight. She didn't. She moved through our home like a tide, steady, patient, wearing the corners round. When she was ill, I hoped the painkillers made me confess in a fever, like a character in a cheap novel. But I sat by her bed and talked about soup and gardenias and how the neighbor's dog always knew when the mail came. She squeezed my hand and told me I'd been a good man. I wanted to tell her that good men don't hide their sons from themselves. I kissed her forehead and carried that sentence home like a sack of cement and stacked it on top of all the other sacks in the place where the weight is supposed to live. After the funeral, Daniel gave a eulogy that was simple and strong. He said his mother taught him to show up. He said she measured time in casseroles on doorsteps and rides to practice. He thanked me for teaching him to work hard. People clapped softly like rain. On the drive home, he kept his eyes on the road and said, "I don't know how to do this without her." I said, "We'll figure it out." Then I looked at his knuckles, white on the wheel, and thought, "You have always done it without the thing you needed. And I am the reason you know how." The shoebox moved with us when I sold the house. It lived at the back of a closet in the condo, under a blanket stitched with little anchors. The tape yellowed. The lid sagged. Sometimes I took it down, set it on the kitchen table, and just looked at it without opening it, like a man who returns to an empty church to stand where he once lied. Once I cut the tape and held the first letter again. "We are delighted to offer you admission." My thumb wore a groove into the word delighted over the years. It felt obscene that the paper stayed whole when the person it was addressed to had been changed by the absence of it. At 79, I had a small stroke, the kind the doctor calls a warning. When I woke in a hospital with half my tongue numb and a buzzing in my right ear, my first thought was not about death. It was about time. Whether I had any left that mattered. Daniel came and sat in the plastic chair by the window. He brought me a thermos of coffee the way I like it, milk and a little honey, and a crossword puzzle we would finish together even though he hates crosswords. He filled in the easy lines to pretend I was helping. He said, "We're okay, Dad. We're okay." I watched his mouth shape, that word okay, and thought of every time he'd chosen it over the other words he might have wanted. Artist. Student. I thought of how I had trained him to lower the volume of his own life. After I came home, I started writing letters I didn't send. Dear Daniel, sometimes I hear a phone ring that isn't ringing. It is the sound of 1979 calling, and I am afraid to pick up. Dear Daniel, I thought I was keeping you from pain. I was keeping myself from fear. Dear Daniel, I am sorry in a way that doesn't end at sleep. I burned through a pack of pens that month. The pages stacked on the table, blue ink and cross-outs like a map to somewhere I'd never let myself go. I tried to hand him one the night we watched a baseball game on my couch. He took the paper, read the first line, and said, "You don't have to explain. We did what we had to." He folded it neatly and slid it back to me. He didn't know he'd just returned a life to the wrong address. Levi grew. The drawings grew too. A teacher asked Daniel if she could submit a piece to a state contest. He said no without looking at it. I saw the way it hit him in the throat as he said it, like swallowing something with edges. I wanted to reach across time and hold the boy inside my son by the shoulders. I wanted to tell him he didn't have to carry my fear like a family heirloom. Instead, I said, "Dan, can I take him Saturday? There's a museum show." He looked at me for a long time, measuring 1,000 small histories at once. Finally, he said, "Yes, in the museum." Levi stood in front of a painting that looked like a city built from smoke. He didn't move for 5 minutes. His breathing slowed. He leaned forward until I thought the guard would cough. On the way to the car, he said, "Is it bad that I think about pictures more than I think about math?" I said, "It's not bad. It's a clue." That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about clues and how they don't help a man who refuses to follow them. I thought about that phone call in our kitchen and how a sentence can split a life in two. The next morning, I made coffee and put the shoe box in the passenger seat like a person. I drove to Daniel's house before sunrise, when the street is empty and honest. I sat in his driveway for 20 minutes, hands on the wheel, watching his porch light flick off like a slow blink. I walked to the door and rang the bell. He opened in a t-shirt, hair standing up, surprised smile, making him young for a second. I said, "There's something I need to show you." He saw the box. He saw my hand shake. He stepped aside. The living room smelled like toast. Levi's backpack leaned against the couch with a pencil poking out of the pocket like a flag. I put the box on a coffee table. The room went very quiet, the kind of quiet where even the clock is careful. The box sat between us like a small animal that might bolt. Daniel looked at it, then at me. He said, "Do I open it, or do you?" My hands remembered how to shake. I said, "I will." I slid the lid off and set the first envelope on the table. He read the name on the front, traced the letters like they might vanish. When he opened it, the room seemed to tilt. "We are delighted to offer you admission." He did not sit. He paced, letter in hand, mouth working with questions that did not know their own shape. Finally, he asked one. "What?" I told him the sentence I had buried under years of duty. I was afraid. Afraid you would suffer. Afraid I would lose you. Afraid of a world I did not understand. So I chose for you. I chose wrong. He nodded once, hard, like a man bracing for an impact that has already happened. He said, "You did not protect me. You protected yourself." I said, "Yes." The clock ticked too loud. Levi's backpack sagged against the couch like an ear. Daniel set the letter down and picked up the next and the next. He read in silence until he could not. He put both hands on the table and breathed like a swimmer at the wall. He said, "I missed my chance." I said, "I stole it." We stood inside that truth and let it do what truth does. It did not fix us. It started us. Levi patted out in his socks, hair a small storm. He saw the papers, my face, his father's eyes. What is it? He asked. Daniel looked at me. I nodded. Tell him, I said. Daniel crouched to Levi's height. He said, when I was your age, I wanted to draw more than anything. I was accepted to schools that saw what I could be. We never went. I stayed and learned another kind of craft. It feeds us. I am proud of it. But I still think in pictures. Levi whispered. Am I allowed to think in pictures too? Daniel closed his eyes. He opened them. Yes, he said. More than allowed. I want to see. Show me what you are making. Levi ran to get his sketchbook. Daniel watched him go and put a hand on my shoulder. His grip said everything his mouth could not yet pronounce. I said, I do not expect forgiveness. He said, I do not have it yet, but I am grateful for the truth. Leave the box. We will keep it open. I walked out into the bright morning and felt the air finally move in my chest. On the porch, I turned to you, the man at his desk, the woman at her sink, the parent in the car outside of practice that ended 20 minutes ago. If you're holding a box, open it. If you are hiding a letter, deliver it. If you are waiting, stop. Go home. Tell them. Then close this device and be with your people. Comment what you will do. Share this with the one who needs it. Do it now.